Howdy, howdy. Welcome back. It's another Workshop Wednesday. This week's edition is a strategy session. We actually have two strategy sessions this month because we had an extra Wednesday. It's a good month. We're going to be talking today about using GA4 acquisition reports to answer the age-old question, how are users finding our websites? Now, of course, before we go too far into this, welcome if this is your first Workshop Wednesday. My name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. I am the co-founder of a company called measurementmarketing.io. And whether you found us through some of the podcasts and talks that we give, maybe you've seen some of our content on some other platforms. We do share some of our content with other platforms like CXL Institute, Social Media Examiner, Measure Summit, Digital Marketer. Maybe you're already a member, whether you're a free Toolbox member or a Measurement Marketing Academy member. We've got the Measurement Mastermind. We have Academy for agencies and teams. There's lots of programs that are available over at measurementmarketing.io. However you found us, we are happy that you're here. It's our job to help people just like you learn how to use all of these tools. And of course, GA4 being the one that we're just going to be talking about for a while to update all the stuff that we used to know how to do with Universal. Well, now we got to do it for GA4. And that includes strategies and making sure that maybe now's the time you got to improve your traffic strategy, hence this workshop. Now, of course, we do have the Measurement Marketing Academy. That is our flagship training program. If, by the way, you happen to be a company or an organization, maybe you're leading a team, and you want to make sure that your entire team has really got a measurement culture, definitely think about something called the Measurement Marketing Academy to do that. It actually gives your team members courses, implement these things, because they can be complicated. They can be frustrating. They can feel tedious. And maybe you've done this before in your own organization where you start to try to plan something out, but you end up being busy, but no reports actually get done. Right? That's a problem. That's because we weren't focused on good enough to get going versions. Nobody really focused on getting one new thing in place, and everyone's just trying to make things better before they get good enough to get going. So this workshop, we're going to be covering a few different areas. And of course, we'll review those at the end. But just think about one thing. Could be just one way of hearing about something that's slightly different than you've heard it before. That could be it. Just practice. Then you come back, rewatch this workshop, pick up another new one thing. All right, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Strategy session, using GA4 acquisition reports to answer, how are our users finding us? Of course, this is the age-old question. We want to know how people are finding our website and if the traffic that we're actually utilizing, those different traffic channels, that they actually are doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? We got to know that. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Of course, we start with the framework. We got to make sure that the training, the workshop that you're watching fits into a framework. There's 3 simple steps: plan, build, and launch. They get us from marketing in the blind, which most of us are doing, to the point where we just use the system to produce revenue and profits kind of as a symptom of using a proper system. Now, again, plan, build, and launch. But the secret is in how we do that. So first, we got to make sure we're asking results and how questions. We gather the information needed to get answers to those questions. And ultimately, we already know the actions we're going to take based upon the answers we get. That's the measurement plan. It's about beyond the scope of today's training, but you got to make sure that's already in place. Now, where does today's training come in? It is in the build, but it's not the results, because the results are what we call ACE, where we measure for awareness, completion, and engagement. You want to make sure that those are set up in your GA4, but this part, traffic, 100% is what we're talking about today in this workshop. Making sure that you've got your traffic properly structured, that you're using UTMs. We're going to show that. And again, this is a strategy session, so it really is made for those of you who are not necessarily the implementer, but as a strategist, you have to know how you're using this stuff and how to speak with your implementation team. So we'll be talking about that as well in today's workshop. Now, the reason you're doing that is so that you have a natural story that starts to appear, so that your data, all this information, really turns into more of a natural story that leads to natural action. Then we can listen to the conversation that's happening between the website and the users. We can then find those trends and patterns and start to forecast based on those recent past. We can start to forecast our near future to say, okay, now this is how this should be working. And then we measure against our forecasts. That's what tells us where to optimize, so we know where to focus our resources to get the biggest bang for our buck. For those of you that are numbers focused, this is where your KPI would be. That's how you find your KPIs, would be in that particular step. So that's the measurement marketing in a nutshell in a system. Now, we're going to go into today's training, which of course is going to focus on traffic. And we thought we're going to start with strategy first, right? This is all strategy workshop. And then we'll show you the GA4 version of this, so at least you can get a little familiar with that interface as well. But the first thing as a strategist, you really need to think about is, okay, what do we want to know about our traffic? And we're going to keep this very basic for this first one. So we're just going to use the 5 things that you really should already be knowing. But if you didn't do this with the Universal, now's the time to at least get these in place for Google Analytics 4. So what do we need to know about our traffic? Really, we have these 5 core blocks here. There are some other new ones that have recently come out, but we're going to just focus on these, right? Basics first. Always get good enough to get going, come back and make it better later. First thing you have to know though, you must know the product's purpose or the traffic's purpose. In other words, why would the traffic source have sent the user over to your site in the first place? What was the purpose of it? So that can be defined as the product or the service. We typically will use it as like, which customer journey are they supposed to be a part of? We'll define that there. But it's the why, right? Why are you sending traffic in the first place? Next is the who. So who is sending traffic? That's the source, right? The brand name of the traffic source. So if it's Facebook or YouTube or Google, right? Email could be, like in our case, we use Infusionsoft for email, so the source would be Infusionsoft. If we use podcast, the source would be the name of the podcast, right? The type of traffic is what? So what type of traffic are you getting from that source so that it can achieve what purpose, right? So you start to see a little bit of a story when you ask these questions around your traffic sources. And I'll show you in just a second how to actually get that into GA, but first is just make sure we're good on the strategy here. So now we can answer why, what type of traffic this source is sending us and the reason it's sending us. In other words, what is it supposed to get done? Then you can ask questions around details. Now, one of those details we typically we'll have a space where we put in either the headline, if it's like a paid ad, the subject, if it's an email, we sort of just put that there in that spot. And then we'll have other details that are specific to that particular source of traffic or to that particular click even from that click that actually was happening that brought them over to our site. And I'll show you some examples of this in just a second. So this is the general strategy, right? We understand we need to know what's the purpose of our traffic, who was it from, what type of traffic were they sending us, maybe some details around the headline or subject that was being used at that point, and then other details that were necessary that might be useful to know about that particular click that particular user made to come to our site, right? So let's show you a little bit of how this fleshes out just a tiny bit. So we get the same blocks here, purpose, source, type, headline, and offer, but what does it actually look like in GA? Well, this is what you will notice. And remember, you might not be the implementer, so I'm not going to go into how to do this. Your implementation team will know, but as a strategist, you must know this exists so you can make sure your implementation team is properly structuring it. Now notice the structure is a little different than this. It's not just these blocks, it's structured a little bit. This is to give you an idea from a strategy perspective, okay, how are all these things organized? So Google Analytics uses a thing called UTMs to get this information. So there'll be a UTM campaign equals, like in our case, we would say Academy, and that defines the purpose is for the Academy customer journey in some way, shape, or form. In that journey, that's the purpose. Then the UTM underscore source, we might say equals, I might say Facebook if we're doing a paid Facebook ad. So then UTM underscore source equals Facebook would tell me that Facebook is the brand name, in other words, the brand name of the traffic source that sent me the traffic for the purposes of the Academy, right? Then the medium, CPC, might be the type of traffic. It might be social. So sometimes we'll do like UTM underscore source is YouTube. That's YouTube being the brand name of the traffic source. UTM medium might be social. That's because it's a link that wasn't paid. So we call it social. It's the type of traffic social versus CPC, which we might say is for paid traffic. We might reserve that term. And so now again, we understand the different types of traffic from the different sources for the purposes of what it's supposed to achieve. And again, I'll show you a little bit more of a detailed example as we go on, but focusing on the strategy first. And you can start to see like the UTM term and the UTM content. Term is where we put the subject or the headline. UTM underscore content is where we define the details for this, right? So you start to see a little bit more of a structure. So this is how analytics gets the information inside Google Analytics. But the structure, one thing is use UTMs. You must use UTMs. They're not optional. Make sure your company is using them on any traffic source that you have control over. They should be used. Never on site, by the way. You typically don't want to use them on site, but you do want to use them for defining traffic sources, which means somebody that's not on your site yet, but you want to get them on your site. That's what a traffic source is supposed to do, right? So this is how we get it in there. Now, this is what it starts to look like. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here. So this is the traffic structure in Google Analytics. So the traffic stuff, I don't actually know why that is blurry there. I guess it's taking a little second on my computer. Let me see here if I can just get this. There we go. Just edit that little part out. Vince, our little editor, can edit that part out for the student editions of this. Okay, so now we've got the traffic structure in Google Analytics. This is what it's sort of the whole story that's going to be able to appear. Now, I took out our key. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the color coding with this. But this would be the campaign, UTM_campaign. Like in our case, we have the Measurement Marketing Academy. So we just call it Academy. That's just how we short code it. So we'll have, this is the campaign. The purpose is for the Academy. Well, what are the different traffic sources that are sending information for the purposes of the Academy journey? Well, I've got Infusionsoft as a traffic source, Facebook as a traffic source, Social Media Marketing Podcast as a traffic source, Mercer, that is me, as a traffic source, Say It Online is another podcast that we were on as a traffic source, Google Ads can be a traffic source, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So all the different traffic sources that are there, those are the UTM_sources that we would define those. Now, what types of traffic? And for those of you who are thinking like, well, why would I have, like, how could we have a type of traffic of email and email here? Because they're the same type of traffic, but they are two different sources of traffic. One is emails coming from Infusionsoft, which is either broadcast or autoresponder. This one is me personally responding to emails. And so I define that. But if I want to know, well, what type of results am I getting from the type of traffic called email from wherever it comes from? I don't care. I just want to know how email works. I can build a report for that because I'm using the same medium. And this is what's important. So you'll see that these two things, I'm going to color code these slightly differently just so you can see. So these particular emails, let's do this. There we go. See how the little dark gray here? So these are the same thing, even though they're different sources, but I know that they're the same type of traffic. So now I can build a report that's all about email traffic and then break it down by source and then break it down by the purpose, right? What the customer journey was for. So then we've got podcast traffic here, right? Same thing we're doing here. So I'll just put these in a different code. So same basic idea. Let's just do this one, just do different color greens. This one, CPC traffic, you get the idea. So, so now I can start to see, okay, I can break it down by traffic type. Now, the cool thing about these podcasts, let's look at podcasts for a second here, just to show you what an example is. When I do a podcast, I will set it up so when they click on the link from the podcast, it UTMs, we call it UTMs because you're doing all these little UTM things here. Again, your implementation team can help you with this. You don't have to be the one doing it, but you do have to understand how and why, right? So what I'll do is I'll put these UTMs so that I know what the topic of the podcast was. So like maybe I did a podcast with social, in this example, it would be telling me social media marketing podcast, right, was podcast traffic for the purposes of the Academy. We talked about GA4 migration, and it was the July 2022 when I did the recording for that podcast. Whereas this podcast was Save It Online. We talked about measurement basics, and then that was a podcast from January that I recorded January of 2019, right? So you can do all this different stuff. We have absolutely done this, which is how we know that podcast traffic was a type of traffic we wanted to get more of because it works really well for us. And it's how we knew to put resources into it because we could see it in our numbers. You can see here in the email traffic, right? Looking at email type of traffic, we're putting in the subject line of the email. And with Infusionsoft traffic, we put a little code number in here. And it really is just a code for us that tells us where the email is in the Infusionsoft system. It actually tells us the campaign ID, the sequence in that campaign, and the actual email in that sequence. So it kind of like it's a map, like a homing signal. So we know exactly if we ever needed to change this email that we could. And that's how we use it. This one, though, my little Mercer emails that come through, they just say personal reply because it's just a personal reply. I don't need to have a code or anything like that. So it's a different style for Mercer emails that I would put in for the term and content here than for the Infusionsoft emails, right? So, and then, of course, you see the same thing on Google Ads. You can put in the CPC for types of trafficking, and paid traffic would be CPC for us is how we would call it. And you can see, okay, paid traffic for Facebook, we're putting in the headline here. Maybe it's an ad that talks about what students are saying about the Academy. And this was student 123, then it was student number 456, student number 789. And we can see maybe was there a student testimonial that was just better than the other ones when it came to re-engaging somebody to purchase the Academy, right? I could do the same thing for Google Ads. It was a brand advertisement where they were searching for the brand of the Academy. And that's why that ad popped up, right? So these are the different things that we can start to see because we're using this structure, which is super important you understand this first, because we know we can ask these 5 questions, we structure them, and that even though we're using different sources and different mediums sometimes, we're keeping one thing that says campaign of Academy. This is very important. You see, it's one block of the Academy because I'm using the same UTM, right? In this case, UTM campaign. I'm using the same value over and over again for all these different traffic sources, right? So let's show what this actually looks like in Google Analytics 4. So I'm going to bring this up here. Okay, so we've got Google Analytics 4, and I'm going to show you kind of like a before and after a little bit. So we're looking at the demo store, and this is where we would be able to answer the question, right? Even as a strategist, you can do this, and you should get somewhat familiar. You don't have to be an expert in the GA4 interface if you're more on the strategy side of things. Your implementers certainly will be experts in that, but you do need to at least have some rudimentary understanding of what this platform currently can do and what it is, so you can talk to your implementation team and ask them specific questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into reports, and then in reports, we're going to go to where it says acquisition. So we're going to give this a second to load up. Here's our life cycle and then acquisition reports. And when we expand this, we see, now this is a demo account, so they're going to be doing some things a little, maybe look a little different than yours. For example, this first user, you may or may not see that on your end, right? So they created a report here and somebody adjusted it and customized it a little bit because they're playing on the demo account. So you may not see this one. You will see acquisition overview, then you will see user acquisition and traffic acquisition. So what we're going to be really focusing on for the remainder of today's training is these acquisition reports, these last two, user and traffic. The only difference between these two is user, they both actually look identical. They look identical. So we'll go into how to use this in just a second. The difference is this one is what was the traffic sources? It's around the traffic and asking the question, how did the user first find my website, right? So in other words, what was the traffic source that acquired the user to actually even be aware that we have a website at all, right? The first initial page view that they see, brand new user for this Google Analytics 4 platform, that's what this is for, user acquisition. Because Google Analytics 4 is a fairly new platform, my sort of understanding, if you're watching this right now, is maybe you've just recently set up Google Analytics 4, or you're starting to really think about setting up Google Analytics 4, but it's the early days of it. Your user acquisition reports are going to be useless. That's not because they're broken, they're not, but remember, it's new user as per how Google Analytics 4 defines a new user, which means the cookies and everything else, right? So however you set up universal analytics, or I shouldn't say that, should never say universal anymore. However you set up Google Analytics 4, when you first set it up, every user is new to Google Analytics 4. Even if they're not new to your brand, they will be new to this particular measurement tool. So user acquisition isn't really going to be a useful report initially. Over time, though, it will, right? So let's say a year from now, you can use this and get a little bit more usefulness out of it. So that's why we're going to focus on traffic acquisition reports, because mostly when you're asking the question, how do people find my site? You're not asking the question, how did they originally find my site, right? Now, if you are, again, you can use this report. It's going to look exactly the same as traffic acquisition. But traffic acquisition is actually substantially more useful, because what you're typically doing is which visits came to my site, which users visited, and how did those visits happen, right? So was it from an email we sent? Was it from a paid ad that we did to get them? Was it the retargeting ad that brought them back to the site? We're not asking about initial user acquisition when we're asking those questions. We're asking about the journey questions, right? What brought them back? What stage in the journey are they at? Did they achieve the result we want them to achieve? All that sort of fun stuff. That is in traffic acquisition. So we're going to click on traffic acquisition. And remember, user and traffic, they look the same, but they are answering two different questions. User acquisition is always about the first hit that came in from that user, the first event that user had. What was the traffic source for it? That's what it records. That's it. That's all it will ever do. Traffic is all about the different sessions, in other words, different visits from your users. And typically, when you're asking a question, you're asking about visits, not the initial user being acquired 4 years ago and what the traffic source was. Like, who really cares at that point? It's the visits that you care about. So you'll mostly be using this traffic acquisition report. Now, as we come down, and I'm going to show you this one in the demo store for Google Analytics, then I'm going to show you ours, because it's going to be closer to what you're going to see on your end. So what I'm going to do first, just for sake of example, to be able to show this entire report, I'm going to minimize this. So we're just going to click right down here, and we're going to minimize that whole nav system so it gives up a little bit more space. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so we can see the entire report without any fades in the back, which is this. All right. So this is what this report shows. By default, it gives you the grouping of the channels that are there, right? Which is okay. But remember, we didn't really talk about channels when we were setting up traffic, because the channel sort of happens on its own, right? You can set that up on its own. You can eventually be able to create your own channels, et cetera, et cetera. What we're going to do is we're going to switch it to the things that we're actually looking for. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to start with, again, going back to our structure, and I'm showing you now how to actually update this a little bit. So if we go back to our structure, we started with, I'm going to go back up here. We started with the purpose, right? Which is the UTM campaign. So that's the campaign name. And that's how we're going to structure this one. So we're going to go back and we're going to start by going into our report here where it says search, right? We have this little search box. Right below it is the drop down that tells you what you're currently looking at. We're going to change this. It's what they call the primary dimension. So we're going to change this primary dimension and we want it to be the campaign itself, which is right here, session campaign. That is the UTM underscore campaign. That is the campaign name. So now you can see all the different campaign names, anything that said UTM underscore campaign for them. See all of that here, right? Not particularly useful, kind of ugly. I agree. So we're going to pretty this one up a little bit by doing another dimension, which is what we're going to click on this little plus sign for. Now, this is hopefully subject to change because this is one of the harder ways to, I think, add this. However, because we know we are in traffic acquisition report, we care about session, right, visits, we're going to instantly go down to session acquisition. You have to click this first because whatever one of these you're in determines what shows up here. So we're first going to click on session acquisition. Then we're going to go to session source medium because we're going to see both. And now we're going to start to see a little bit more of a story that's coming back here with the Google Analytics demo store. So we're just going to give it a second to load up that secondary dimension, which will be the source medium. And then what we should see is we're going to see the campaign, which is the point of the traffic. And then we should see the source and medium, which remember, if we go back to our initial thing here, we're going to see the point of the traffic. The purpose of the traffic is the campaign. Then we're going to see source, which is the brand name of the traffic source. And then the type of traffic, which is the medium, right? Source medium. So that's what we're going to see. And these top three you can get a lot done with. Let's go back and we're going to take a look. Okay, so now we've got our campaign and then our source mediums. Now what I'm going to do is I wanted to just see everything that was going on with all of these different campaigns here. If I wanted to see what was happening with like the t-shirt sales or something like that, I really can't tell. And this all of a sudden becomes a limitation because they didn't have a proper UTM strategy, hence the strategy session part of this. Even though somebody's using UTMs in Google, right? They've got all these different traffic sources coming through and you can see all this stuff. It's great that they have this, but it's really hard for me to answer specific questions around it because they have all this sort of weird campaigns back here, right? It wasn't something as simple as you saw us talk about with like Word Academy, right? And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But you see this sort of things back here. I can go and I can search. So if I click in search, it's going to search both of these dimensions for whatever I look for. So if I said, okay, well, let's look for anything that says demo, maybe just do that. So maybe we see demo traffic. And it would be any of these Google Analytics demo things that are here or anything that says demo and source medium. So here we go. Now here's our demo accounts, Google Analytics demo campaigns, and they all say, here's Google CPC. So we can tell, okay, it's getting a little cleaner, a little bit, not great. This is not great, but it's okay. Where you say, okay, the source of traffic was Google. It was paid traffic from Google. So there's our brand. Here's our type of traffic for the purposes of this particular campaign. This one was also from Google, paid traffic for this campaign. This one was from Google for traffic for this campaign, right? And the reason that they're separate campaigns here is this one said DSP, it's display, this one was for shopping, right? So they're breaking it out there. I personally wouldn't recommend that, but this is how they're doing it. And it's okay. You can tie now results to things. So if I scroll over to the side, and again, this is a bit beyond the scope of today's training, but you would set up conversion events and you can see, okay, well, how many actually led to purchases? How many actually led to whatever the thing is that you're looking for? And then you can actually start measuring specific traffic sources, the purpose of those traffic sources. Did they achieve their purpose, right? That's the whole point of this. In this case, purchases. So this particular one got a bunch of purchases. This particular one didn't, right? Now we don't know that this particular one was designed for purchase. Maybe it was designed for more engagement or more awareness. Who knows? That's not quite how they have their account set up, so it's tough to tell. But it gives you something, right? You can see in the demo store, at least I got a little bit of information. I can tell this one is definitely outselling anything else that's on this particular page right now, right? Now, again, probably because it's got a lot more traffic to it as well. So you can see user counts, etc. But you get the idea. Now, I'm going to show you on ours, on Measurement Marketing.io. I'm going to show you this for two reasons, because it's going to be closer to what you're seeing on yours probably, and because if you own your own account, which hopefully you do, you're going to be able to see a little different of an option. I'm going to show you a cool little hack on this. So I'm still in acquisition, traffic acquisition. I haven't changed anything, but this is what happens by default. It will always show you the default channel grouping. And you saw before, I'm going to do an apples to apples comparison first, and then I'm going to show you a cool little hack. So first is I'm going to do session campaign. That's what we did on the other one. And you're going to see our campaigns are a little different than what Google demo store does on there. It's a little easier, right, to come through. I see there's all my Academy traffic. Here's traffic for boot camps. Here's traffic for members that are existing members, right, coming through. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add secondary dimension. And we're going to do a session acquisition, and we're going to pull in the session source medium because I want to see the brand of traffic and the type of traffic from that brand for the session itself, right? The thing that created the session itself. So we're going to give that a second to load up, and that adds us our secondary dimension. And then I'm just going to search for the Academy traffic because that's all I'm asking questions around. Right? I just want to know about the Academy customer journey, and I want to know all the different source and mediums for the Academy customer journey, which is what I have here. Even the Academy for Teams program is in here. So, but here I've got Academy, and I've got all the different, I got Infusionsoft email, right? So email is coming from Infusionsoft for the purposes of Academy. There's my YouTube social traffic. So social traffic coming from YouTube for the purposes of the Academy journey. There's paid traffic coming from Google for the purposes of the Academy journey. There's affiliate traffic coming from Infusionsoft for the purposes of the Academy journey. I've got podcast traffic coming from Perpetual Traffic. Thank you, gentlemen, that run that podcast for the Academy journey. I've got email that was not set. This was a mistake, right? This is where I would go back to my team and say, hey, implementers, we got a problem here. Somebody forgot to put the source for the Academy. I've got a resource. This is kind of a cool one. So resource traffic is whenever we create something in the toolbox, we will, at the very last page of the tool, whatever it is, it says, hey, if you want to learn more about this, click here to join the Academy. And then that is UTM'd. We know that those resources are working because we can see it. We know it's us. So it says MMIO, so measuremarketing.io. So we know we created a resource for the purposes of moving somebody through the Academy journey as we come through. Now, when I go over to the right, I can see all my different conversion events that are coming through here. And I can see there's my ACE goals. We call these ACE results. So we have the awareness of the Academy when they completed the Academy as they engaged along the way, which in our case would be seeing the cart page of the Academy. So I can flip to Academy Aware, and now I can measure. Now remember, it's beyond the scope of today's training. We've already set these awareness, results up already. But we can, because I'm measuring for Academy awareness, I can now say, of all the traffic that was supposed to send for the Academy customer journey, here are the ones that did, which ones are better at making people aware of the Academy. And then I can flip it and say, which ones are actually really good at getting them to engage in the Academy, right? And we're going to see a drop off because awareness is one thing when they see the page, but getting them to see the cart is different. So maybe there is an email here, which gets like a cart abandonment email, right? Well, it'd be like, hey, I noticed you look at the Academy. Why not go back to the cart? Take a look at it. So we can see if this stuff is working or not, right? And then ultimately for purchases, right? As you come through, I can measure for the completion as well. So again, I'm starting to understand now the different traffic sources, the source, the brand name of the traffic source, the type of traffic coming from that brand name, and the purpose of it, right? For which customer journey are they supposed to be moving through? Some of these are defined more for awareness. Some of these are defined more to complete. Everything's different, right? Everything has its own purpose back there. And now I can measure to see, is it achieving the results it's supposed to achieve? So now I can answer the question, is my traffic working like it's supposed to? In other words, not just how are they finding us, but are they finding us for the right customer journey? And are they doing the thing they're supposed to do in that customer journey that traffic source wanted them to do, right? We can see all of that. Now, I said I was going to show you a little bit of a hack on this because we own this account. Now you notice you will not be able to do this in the demo account. So I'm going to do kind of an apples to apples comparison. I'm just minimizing that little nav window so we can see apples to apples here. So here's the demo store. Here's ours, right? Real close so far. Session campaign, session source medium, session campaign, session source medium, real close. The big difference is actually up here. So when you see in the upper right-hand corner how we have these three options, right, to do things, but on mine, the one I own, I have a fourth option, which is to customize. So watch what we can do with this. This is kind of cool. I don't actually know why they make you do this. I would think they would change this over time, and they might still, but I like that at least we can customize. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the initial default generic report, and I'm going to customize it and change it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click where it says dimensions, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, the dimensions that I want to have access to, see that? So all the dimensions that are here that show up in this little block, they show up because they are here in this little area. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on add dimension because that's what we want to do. And we're going to scroll down to where we're adding source medium right there. So now I can do source medium. So now I've got my source medium that's sitting there. And now if I click on apply, and we go through to this report. Oops, back to this report. We should see source medium right in there. So now I've got my source medium that's coming through, and then I can go and I can add in a secondary dimension of campaign. So second acquisition, let's go to campaign right there. So now I've got source medium and the campaign. So what are the different brands, types of traffic for the purpose of, and of course I could do the same thing and just say, okay, I want to go to find everything for Academy or whatever the particular customer journey is that I wanted, right? Now I'm showing you what's possible within the Data Studio, the GA4 reports. Keep in mind, we use Data Studio for all of our end reporting. I think you should as well as an organization. It works really well getting out of the GA4 reports because they are a little clunky, right? As you can see, they're not the easiest things in the world to get through. And they're fine for data people to be in. And so if you need to find an answer, I wanted you to know this as a strategist, this is here to show you how you take something that looks like this, these little UTMs and the thinking behind traffic and what it actually translates and that it looks like, right? It looks like this is how these end up showing up in here. And that you can tie it to a specific result that you're measuring for, right? If you've got that set up. But ultimately, you'll work with your team to get something like a Data Studio report that shows you very clearly, here's the journey. These emails are supposed to make people aware. These emails are supposed to get them to complete. How are they doing their job? Now you've got this nice little email performance report that's built out. But the reason that you can build that out, the reason that your team can build that out for you is because you understood that there were UTMs and that you can use these UTMs in a certain way. They have to be structured like this so that they can naturally tell a story back there. And now you have what you need to actually answer the question, how are users finding us? You can do that within GA4 if you wanted to, how making them aware of the toolbox or making them aware of the Academy, right? Whatever the thing is I'm trying to get them to do, I can see, is this traffic doing what it's supposed to be doing as I'm coming through? And look out for more of these things. So there'll be more, my guess, I'm totally guessing. My guess is there'll be more dimensions back here. There'll be more availability for customization back here. You can then save the report, and add it to your own reports if you want to customize that. So there's lots of different things that you can do with GA4. Again, the reason we don't have some of this, we played with some of this just to show people how to do the libraries and stuff. But we don't use GA4 for the reports. We use Data Studio for the reports. So again, it's using GA4 as the data source for that report, which is why you still need to make sure it's all in here and properly set up just like we did. But Data Studio is what actually displays it all for us. Okay. So with that, of course, Data Studio being a bit beyond this training as well, but it kind of gives you the idea. What was your one thing from this particular training? I know if I'm not using UTMs at all, it's the fact that UTMs exist, but very quickly, I'm hoping you really are using UTMs already in some way, shape, or form. But if you're not, use them. But right after that, immediately after that, structure them properly. Most clients, most students that we talk to do not have UTMs structured properly, which is why they cannot ask Google Analytics a simple question like, well, how are all the different traffic sources working together to move somebody through this customer journey, right? Customer journey A or customer journey B. And the reason that analytics cannot tell you that is because you haven't put in your traffic in a way that is naturally structured like we showed you earlier in this training. Now, if you are an Academy member, of course, you can get help from Ask Instructor Support. We're more than welcome to help you out. You can show us your UTMs, how you're structuring stuff, the types of questions you're asking, and the instructors will give you suggest a different strategy if you need it for UTMs as well. Remember, when you're thinking about the framework and where it fits in, traffic is important, but not before results. If you don't have your ACE results set up first, where you're measuring for awareness, completion, and engagement of each customer journey that you have, and you might have multiple, right? One for each product or service, one for your overall brand. So set up all those things first, then really double down on your UTMs, make sure they're structured properly. And that's where you start to see a natural story that connects the traffic to the specific result that traffic was supposed to connect or create or cause. So that's how that whole thing fits together. All right, next week, we switch to the first Wednesday of the month. And so we go back and we look at all the updates that happened from the previous month and cover all of those for you. So next week, that means it's a What's New workshop. We'll be covering all of the updates that happened in June of 2022. Definitely the ones that came out for GA4. Definitely some bunch came out for Data Studio. But we'll go through all the platforms and get you caught up. So that'll be the catch-up workshop. If you want that one, you just got to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are almost at 4,400, about to hit 4,500. So thank you for everybody leaving the kind comments. I love the suggestions in the comments. Topic suggestions you want to put in there, put those in there. Again, we're not able to respond to every single comment. However, we do see them. and they do affect the curriculum of the workshop. So if you have specific topics you want to have in there, let us know, and we will do that. So again, just subscribe to the YouTube channel. The other way that you can get our training is in the Measurement Marketing Toolbox. There is a free version, which is the Toolbox. Toolbox is free. It comes with the most current workshop Wednesday, so you at least always have that one. And of course, you would also have the YouTube channel for the previous ones. But it also has toolkits. And the Measurement Toolbox is all of the tools that we've created for our members that we are allowing everybody to have access to, not just our members. So the traffic tracking toolkit is back there. And if this topic is at all interesting, this is what I would recommend. Create your Toolbox membership if you don't have one already, and then get the traffic tracking toolkit. Download that and start playing with that, because there's a training video there. It talks about UTMs. It gives you some other rules for UTMs and how to actually use them and structure them. And at least it'll get you up and running for this particular topic of this workshop. To do that, just go to measure.tips/WW. It'll ask you for your name and your email, and it'll send out your little login information, and you'll have access to it. The only thing we ask is that you use it. So every 90 days or so, if you haven't used it for 90 days, you might get an email that says, hey, is it okay if we free up this spot for somebody else? And if we don't hear from you, we'll free up the spot automatically, or you can just tell us. But if you want it, it's not a problem. Just keep it. And the only thing we ask is that you're using it, which for us is just roughly every 90 days you're in there taking a look at stuff that's back there. So again, if you're using it, it's entirely up to you. You can keep it for as long as you want. That's it, though. That's the deal. Use it. So measure.tips/WW. All right. The other option we have, of course, is the Measurement Marketing Academy itself. This is our paid flagship program. It is a just-in-time learning platform. Comes with courses about measurement strategy, because I think that's the most important part. It's, learning how to use a stove does not mean that you're a chef. Just like learning how to use Google Analytics does not mean you understand measurement in an organization. So the Measurement Marketing Academy does both. It teaches you how to measure. It teaches you how to be a chef. But then it also shows you the tools that you need in order to do that. So in the case of measurement, it's going to teach you the strategies of measurement, how to think about measurement, how to come up with the right questions, what to do, the actions you can take, and how to think about the whole thing. And oh yes, of course, we're going to show you how to do that with Google Analytics 4, with Tag Manager, with Data Studio, with all the different tools and things that are out there. Plus, it comes with Ask Instructor support. So you have access to the instructors, send over videos and screenshots. They will send over videos and screenshots back. It comes with the Winner Circle community. So you have other members that are back there with other people that are sharing their skills or asking questions around other topics that are outside of measurement. That's back there. So there's lots of different options that are available for you. With the Academy, it's got everything you need related to digital measurement. If it is of all the stuff we're talking about, if you are slightly interested in it, definitely take a look at the Measurement Marketing Academy. To find out about the current options that are now available, just go to measure.tips/getacademy. Again, measure.tips/getacademy, and that'll take you and show you what's currently available for the Measurement Marketing Academy. We look forward to having you as part of the Academy soon. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. This has been Strategy Session, using GA4 acquisition reports to answer how are users finding us. Thanks again for watching this workshop. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.